And then I want to first make sure that you can all see my, my monitor display. If someone can just answer yes in the chat box, that'd be great. And can you all hear me? Okay, we'll get started then. Okay, the information from LibLine this week is basically new links to the LAK 5.20 notes, or I'm sorry, documents, starting with the release notes, followed by the Superlibrarian Training Guide, the Discovery Layer Customization, and the User Manual. The documentation has been a priority for Jane, so she's been trying to make sure everything's up to date as progress continues to be made on the software itself. I did have a conversation with Patrick this week. The information that he shared with me, I think, is of interest to everyone. He told me that the development team that is working on the offline circulation had started from an erroneous assumption. They had assumed that they were going to use the old Kyle Hall Koha offline circ, if you remember that from a while back, as the base, and it just wasn't working right. It wasn't working well. And once Patrick found out what they were doing, he told them to cease and restart over and make it a browser-friendly program, so that it's going to be within the software. It's not going to be an outside program like the old offline circ was. So that is a top priority for them now, and they are working on that. The documentation doesn't include any information about offline circ yet, but it will eventually be there. Yesterday, I got information from Jane talking about the new documentation, and you can see I have a few things written down here. I'm going to share with you this Word document, and because it's still in edit mode. Maybe if I change that. No, I'll just leave it. Because it's still in edit mode, you'll see all of the underscores and everything that was there. But what I did is when I did the update of this document, I did turn the track changes on. So it should be relatively easy to find the changes in here. For example, there's the little bars at the left-hand side of the text, and the change text is in red. So that after the meeting, when I send this out to you, you'll be able to see what all the changes are quite easily. Okay, the first item that I wanted to just go over and just make sure that you're aware of it is that the ability to set default settings for creating item records is now included in the software. It's documented in the user manual, so you'll be able to read about it. Since I only got this information yesterday, I didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of testing. So I'm not going to try and show you this one because I haven't looked at this one yet. The next significant change here is about the patron interface. And this particular item is both under the Find and under the Patrons headings in this document, just so that you'd be sure to see it. But the part that I want to focus on today is this new section in administration that is a way that you can identify your different kinds of fines and or fees. in administration, which we get to again by on more and then administration, you can see on the second column labeled circulation, there is a new one that's here called invoice account types. And on the invoice account types page, you can identify whatever kind of fee you want to add to your patron's patron record. And there's also one that they identified a couple actually as invoices. And you can then select which ones would have a manual invoice that's created. Again, I haven't played a whole lot with this, but it's very similar in setting up to like the excuse me, like the item fields, the custom item statuses. So that's something I think that will be relatively easy. This is already in the documentation, and it is still under review, if I recall correctly. Let me see. No, sorry, wrong document. But that is something that you need to be aware of because of the whole change, because of the whole change in the way that fines are handled in patron records. That makes it especially important that your circulation people are made aware of this so that they don't start looking at this the day that it goes into production in your library. This is a pretty big change that we can see here. Okay, let me go to a patron record. I'm going to choose someone else. And in our patron record, you can see that there is, it looks a little bit different than what you're using in production right now. The left-hand panel is right-hand justified instead of left-hand justified. So that's the first visual cue that you have to get used to. And then when we go down to our patron accounting, excuse me, you'll notice that this particular page also looks different. I think it's relatively easy to understand, and you can see pretty much what is currently owed to the library and also the last payments that have been made. Now I'm going to have to move things around here a little bit on my page so I can see the whole screen. But you'll notice that anything that's overdue will appear in red type. That applies both on the patron accounting page and on the patron's account page that they can look at if they sign in. This is very clearly laid out so that you can see exactly what's going on here. And you'll notice that there is a checkbox by these, and our drop-down then has the options of pay, credit, forgive, or write off. So those options are still the same, it's just that you access them a little bit differently. One of the pieces that I read in the release notes is that there have been many changes that have been made to this particular module, and before you used to have to pay each fine or fee individually. My understanding now is that you can pay the total amount in one transaction. So if you want to say this, it says fee summary, all fields, $44. And if you want to pay it in full, you can do that. Now, remember, some of these are accruing overdues, so I would probably use this particular feature with caution, at least until you've tested it enough and know that it's definitely going to work well for you. Okay, in order to add a fee, if I recall correctly, on the fines page that you look at, the fines and fees, you have different tabs that you can choose across the top. We can add a credit in any of these formats, or we can add a fee or an invoice. The fee type itself is the one that you can define in the invoice account settings that I showed you. And as I said, since I just learned about this yesterday, I haven't really tested it out a lot, but you'd then be able to identify what your invoice is going to be. If it's a fee, you can identify the refunds. You notice that you can link it to a barcode, but you don't have to. You can simply describe what you're doing here. And since I'm not adding anything, I'm just going to cancel out of that. This is already documented in in two places. It's documented in both the Superlibrarian Guide, that should say instead of guide, and also in the user manual in the fines section. I do have the user manual open here. Okay. So I'm sorry, I lost my citation here. 513. Okay, that's why. All of the new circulation pieces are sort of in the same place in the documentation. So instead of going to the top and doing the search as I normally would, I'm just coming and scrolling up here until I find the fines information. And it starts up here a little bit farther. This fine section is long. So the first piece that I would suggest, or the first thing that you ask your CERC people to do, is to review the documentation. So you'll see how this is all working. There are several pages, as I said, and the screens have been updated pretty much. I don't think Jane has them all updated yet, but they are primarily, they're mostly updated, so it should be easy enough to read through them. Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, that's the patron information. Whenever I found a citation in the release notes that hadn't made it into the first version of this file, I did add it here so that you had an easy way to find the documentation itself. Let me go to my next, and we won't stop and look at all of those. We'll just sort of skip by them. Okay, the next one that I want to talk about is the patron anonymization, and this one is majorly different as it was before than it was before. If you recall, in the current version you're using in production, on the tools page there is an option to anonymize or delete patrons, and that is what you use in order to start that process. That is changed dramatically in this version. So you can, the default, let me say it this way, the default is to scrub history so patrons can't see their history, and so that you can't see it either. The way that they can set it, or the way that you can turn it on, is you can either turn on the patron history in the role record if you have all of your patrons linked to a patron user role, or you can set it in each individual record. The patrons can set it themselves in their patron account information. So let me go back and, well, first of all, I'll show you. Okay. The important thing is to remember that if you leave it the way it is as it gets installed, it's going to anonymize history for everyone, including library staff, and patrons must opt in to retain the history. That's as I understand it, Jennifer, that if you don't turn it on, you won't have any options to see it. So for you, it might make things a lot easier. The information in here shows where it is. There is a new preference, a new system preference under user preferences that is called retain issue history. And let me go back to the detail page here. So that you can see where it is. You can see that there's a retain hold history and a retain issue history. And if that is checked on in this first select box, that means that the history will be enabled. The second box that we have over here is how the patron how you can set it up so the patron can have a customized view of this. But this right here, this retain issue history, this box right here is the important one. If you don't click it, you will not maintain patron history. If you do check it, you will retain patron history. Notice that the hold history is the same way. So if you want to anonymize not only checkouts, you can also anonymize hold history as well. So that's a decision that you'll need to make. This is where you set it in the patron record. If you have role records for your patrons, you can then, let me just search here. And in this case, in the details, I do have the option just like I did in an individual record. So that's one thing that you need to be aware of. Again, I would suggest that you take some time before you start working with LAK 5.20 and read through this information. And then once the software is in your sandbox, I would definitely recommend that you go through and test this to make sure that it's exactly what it is that you want to do. Any questions about that? Let me come back here and just show you that in our tools menu, if you'll recall, I had shown you this before, that there is just a delete patrons. So if you move to 5.20 at some time in the future and try to anonymize patron records the same way that you did before, you will be very frustrated because it won't be found on the tools page where it is right now. Okay. the updated testing or the updated document that I have here, I will send out to the mailing list as soon as the meeting is over. I had intended to attach it to the notification, but I didn't remember to do that. I did add in at the bottom a list of the recent fixes. These are the newest ones that I found in the release notes. And because I know that some of these were issues that some of you had reported, I decided to add that in so that you could see it. Okay. Okay, so that's basically the features piece of the LAK 20 update. Right now, I don't have a date to tell you about when the software will be added into your sandboxes. It will be sometime this month, but Patrick did say that, you know, as they're finding bugs during their testing, that they're trying to get those all fixed before they have the software packaged up for release. So I think that that's a good sign that they're taking the time to do that. I know that you would like to see it in your sandboxes sooner rather than later, and hopefully the next time we meet I'll have, or actually hopefully before the next time we meet I'll have some information I can send to you on the Waldo support mailing list. I will remind you too that in terms of looking at the software and figuring out how you would like to have the new settings set up in your sandbox when you get it, you can always go to the Waldo sandbox. The version of the software that is on the Waldo sandbox is 5.19.14, which is a little bit newer than it had been. There are a few changes in cataloging. Definitely serials is something that you would, if you're using it and intend to continue using it, that you'll need to look at and test. And I did notice that there were several fixes for the serials module that were mentioned in the release notes. There was nothing specific, but just it was mentioned that there had been some fixes. In the release notes, LibLime, or Jane has been very careful to maintain the column that tells you if they are still testing. So so anything that is in this bright pink color, that means that they're still testing it, that they're not quite finished with it, even if it has been written up in the documentation. So that will give you a good idea about what is there. The lost item handling definitely is something that I would suggest that you look at closely too once you get the software. But you can see there are still several areas that they are working on testing. The other piece that you need to know is that South Central Library System has been doing testing on the software, and especially down in the new or in the fixes area, you will see, excuse me, Code Fusion listed as the reason, or even farther down, you'll start seeing South Central listed in the fixes as well. So like here. I haven't really seen anything major on the version 5.20 support center list. So I think that things are becoming pretty stable. There are just a few pieces that are missing, the ones that I've pointed out that need to be there before I would be happy to have it in the sandboxes. And I will keep, like I said, I will keep you up to date on that. Okay, the enhancements, we're still discussing those with Patrick. Last time I reported to you, let's see, this is what had been sent. for the level of efforts. And I did receive a file back from Patrick that updated this. And we did receive, let me find, okay. We did get additional information from LibLime. This is still a working document since we haven't identified yet specifically which features we're going to use, but the column F is the amounts of time that LibLime suggested that it would take in order to add these features. The ones in blue are the ones that we had asked for. I noticed this the other day that this should say 10 to 32, 10 for the medium, 10 for the small option and 32 for the medium option. This is the one where we asked for 2 different specs because it could be implemented 2 different ways. So the numbers on this particular form show how many hours would be suggested for development. And I still don't have a dollar amount from John. Once I find it, I will find out what it is, I will let you know. But there is one additional piece that I wanted to, well, that's great, Ben. One other thing that I wanted to tell you about this, from the time that I asked for the original level of effort for the 5 small projects that were there, I had talked to all of you during a meeting, and I did receive some input back identifying some of the other projects as priorities. So I added those to the priority list, and what I discovered, or what we found back, or what Patrick sent back to us, was an estimate that essentially handles the authority requests that are number 21, 24, and 20, no, let's see, 21, 24, and 20, I believe. Anyway, the programmers responded to those and said that they are very, well, wasn't just, Patrick said that it's something that they are interested in working on, the authorities module. So what they have suggested to us is to take these other authority ones that we didn't ask for levels of effort on, and to put them together into one big project. And they estimated that that work would be 160 hours. They also, or Patrick also said that since LibLime is quite interested in getting those changes made to the authorities module, that they would throw in development time so that the 160 would be split between us and LibLime somehow. I don't have any information on what that would be. And John asked if other libraries such as South Central might be interested in it. And Patrick said that he would approach South Central and ask them about it because that is something that they are quite interested in as well. So it may turn out that we'll not only have some small issues addressed, but we might also be able to work the authorities piece into the development plan. I will send out with the other document the newest version of this particular spreadsheet so that you have all of the current numbers and which pieces are identified together. it's something that I think if we can finally come to an agreement on these, that we'll be able to have some new development in the software pretty quickly. Okay, next thing on my agenda is talking about the recordings. And even though I promised to get some more recordings on YouTube by now, I haven't done that yet. I'll try to get that done before, I'll get at least one out there before next week. I have a slight learning curve on that because I want to edit the recordings before I put them out there, so you don't hear all of the and additional noises. I think those could be easily cut out of there so that you get a more professional looking recording. Okay, are there any questions that you'd like to have asked? Anything that you would like to ask about? Okay, I'm not seeing any chat messages come in with questions, and no one's speaking up, so this is all that I have this week. The next meeting that I have scheduled on my calendar is on May 24th. I wanted to ask if there will be people around on May 24th, or is that the time, or will that time be vacation time or off time for you? If that is the case, I would suggest that we move to a summer schedule in June, basically, which would continue what we've been doing every other week. But I'm not sure. Okay, summer schedule works fine. Well, I'll leave the meeting still scheduled for the 24th. I'll send out any update information about when 5.20 might be added into your sandboxes. And I will start scheduling the summer pieces probably, let's see, ALA is at the end of June. So I'll probably schedule it so that we have at least one meeting before then, if not two. And then we'll meet every other week until the end of July, beginning of August. Oh, certainly. Certainly, I will do that. Thank you, Sierra, for asking about that. Okay, that's pretty much all that I have for today. We'll meet again in a couple of weeks, or if not, in June. Thank you all.